What's one mistake you see people making when it comes to this idea of protecting people from fraud? As we age, protecting our financial well-being becomes just as important as growing our savings. Yet many families aren't prepared for the warning signs or uncomfortable conversations that can prevent fraud before it happens. Today, we'll discuss why older adults are especially vulnerable to fraud, what red flags to watch for, and some practical steps you can take to help protect yourself and the people you love. Hello, and welcome to Money on Your Mind from Edelman Financial Engines. I'm Michael Liersch, a behavioral scientist, financial planner, and your chief planning officer at EFE. Thanks for joining us for a conversation about how people are feeling about money, what they're wrestling with, and how financial planning can help you straighten things out. Today, we're talking with Paul Jordan, an EFE financial planner that I've gotten to know over the past months. Paul is a wonderful human being, and we're so lucky to have him here. Paul, welcome to Money on Your Mind.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Paul, I know that you have a really extraordinary background in financial planning and financial services. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your passion? Our listeners love to hear it, around helping clients, and in particular, why this topic, vulnerability, financial fraud, is so important to you. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself and about why you care about this topic so much?
Okay, Michael. So when I graduated from Virginia Tech many years ago, I became a journalist at a daily newspaper, and I covered a myriad of topics. And as I began to cover some financial industry articles, I found a fascination. And as a result, I evolved into a financial advisor in a trainee position at that time. And I never looked back. And I've now been at Edelman Financial Engines for 19 years. I am a certified financial planner, and I'm in the business of helping my clients to reach their financial goals and objectives. And one thing I found, much to my surprise, is that elder abuse, elder fraud is a lot more prevalent than many may think. And another point is that financial decision-making is one of the first areas of cognitive decline. It's actually common, and it's something that I believe can be overlooked not only by financial advisors, but even more so by family members.
So, Paul, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And let's just then hop right into it. So when we think about this idea of the common nature of financial fraud and exploitation, but also in conjunction with cognitive decline, or let's just call it what it is, Paul. As we age, to your point, the brain just doesn't work as well as it did when we were younger. And that doesn't even need a label. I think we all know that that is just factually true. So tell us a bit more about why those two together, and I do want to also bring other age groups in here. So this idea of the brain just not working as well and being vulnerable to financial exploitation and fraud, why that should make us all pay attention given the fact pattern you just highlighted.
Well, I've noticed patterns, and one of them would be that as people age, sometimes they become more isolated, they a little more lonely as a result. And so they're a bit more vulnerable and suggestive to those that may want to take advantage of them. Oftentimes, as people age, kids can relocate to different areas of the country, and it's a slow, almost such a gradual process that many may not notice that their elder loved ones are getting older, and their ability to have good judgment with finances and with reading people and making good decisions can decline. And as a result, elder folks can be taken advantage of in a myriad of ways.
Let's also highlight younger audiences, because cognitive decline doesn't just affect, and financial fraud doesn't just affect older audiences, it affects younger ones as well. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen there in terms of young people maybe looking the other way with their own cognitive decline for a spouse or partner themselves. Have you seen that at all by chance?
Um, I have, yes. I think what happens is if we see let's say a spouse, a close family member, even a close friend, showing signs of cognitive decline, we may be in denial. We may even joke about it. It may start with forgetting words and that sort of thing. But what it can do is cause bad decision making with finances, and it's the mistakes that people make with their finances that can really derail a lot of good discipline and saving over the years. So when we see things like this, it's something that should be addressed up front, and it's a delicate topic, and it needs to be approached that way. But procrastination is not a prudent path when we're seeing things like this with loved ones and family members.
So you really pointedly highlighted the reason, the motivation then to, at any age, really look into any signs that you might be seeing. So let's hop into some of those signs right now. So what kinds of signs or red flags might indicate, again, at any age, whether, you're trying to detect it or not, might present themselves where you'd say, this is something that we shouldn't be joking around about. It's something that we should observe and track and ensure that we're in a good decision-making place, financially speaking, either together or, we need to, go figure this out. What are some things we should be looking for here, Paul?
Okay. One would be when clients become more aloof than they typically have been over a period of time. When that happens, I'll want to check in and just have a general call and make sure things are going okay. And not necessarily a finance call, but a call just to check in on someone's well-being and to see if they have any questions, that sort of thing. And it's surprising what we can discover when we just have a personal conversation with somebody. So I'd also say that if I find that clients are, to really flip this over, if they're calling a lot and they're forgetting some of the things that we've talked about in recent conversations, that can be a red flag. Also, frustration. If I hear a client speak about frustration with either a friend or a family member about finances where maybe they're getting some pressure, that's always a bit of a red flag. And one big red flag would be if there's someone new in somebody's life and they are particularly interested in one of my clients' finances, and perhaps they're younger, and I'm hearing that there's maybe even a romance of something along those lines, that's a red flag, and that's when we could all get together, have a conversation, and if need be, potentially involve another family member, or for starters, talk with a client about it and make sure that everything's on the up and up.
So with all of that, it sounds like there's behavior changes that you're trying to detect, in a sense. There's almost this from to. So why don't you walk through with us some really key behavior changes that we can all look out for that might be helpful so that we can say, well, there's something to do here. Can you just walk through, maybe a handful of those?
Sudden and unexplained changes to beneficiaries on IRAs or annuities. In reference to estate planning, changes to people's wills or trusts that don't make sense, and involvement of people that are new that I've not heard of in the past, where someone new on the scene is exerting pressure on somebody. These are huge red flags. Another thing is when a client expresses frustration that they're being pushed, and sometimes this can be said in really subtle ways. So I think what we can do as advisors is inquire a little more deeply, something as simple as, I hear a concern there. Is there anything more you'd like to tell me here? Let them speak up. But those are the types of things that I look for. And when I see something like that, what I want to do is involve a trusted family member which speaks to the point of a trusted contact form. As a habit, it's a good practice for financial advisors to have a trusted advisor in place, i.e., permission to speak with someone, one of a person's family members. That authorization is there, and perhaps get some help for somebody who's struggling.
So, Paul, that's an interesting one because I know there are a lot of people who are confused about what you enable when you name a trusted contact in something like a trusted contact form. So why don't you just share what that person is actually enabling? Because sometimes they get concerned that they're going to enable that person to have access to all their accounts and to transact on those accounts. And we both know that's not true. So why don't you say what is true about that trusted contact form?
Yes, the trusted contact form is far more limited than something like a power of attorney. It is simply an authorization from a client to a planner to reach out to a family member to have a general conversation, perhaps about the client's well-being and general questions. It gives us an avenue to reach out to a family member if we sense that a client is struggling or that there may be some impairment issues that we'd want to share with someone who has the client in their best interest.
What does the conversation look like? Maybe it doesn't involve you as a financial professional, Paul, but let's just say we have all these listeners and they're thinking, "Ooh, I'm seeing that," or "That's happening." What does the conversation look like that's not threatening, that doesn't accuse, the vulnerable human being, but more is open and listening and trying to understand? What does that sound like for a family member to go and address this kind of situation?
Well, I think in an open conversation that's coming from a place where this family member wants to help their loved one. So an example would be they could simply say, "I see that you're taking a big distribution from your account, however they found out. Could you talk to me about what the money is going to be used for?" And I think something simple like that may open up a conversation. And I want to take it from a different standpoint now. From a financial advisor view, anytime money is being invested, we want to know the source of the funds. And by the same token, whenever money is going to be distributed from an account, it's a regular habit for a financial advisor to ask what the client would be using the money for. So it's not an unusual question at all for an advisor to ask a client. And in most cases, clients are quite upfront about it. If a client were not upfront about it, that's when I would be concerned and I would want to dig in further. And that's when I may want to take the route of a trusted contact.
The second question I want to ask you before we close out the podcast and ask two questions everyone likes around, mistakes and what actions they should take. I want you to share with us what it looks like ultimately to get help. Who should you reach out to? How should that unfold? Can you share that with us?
Yes, and from a client perspective, if a client feels that they're being pressured to do something with their money that they don't want to do, what I would encourage them to do is to reach out to first a trusted family member and, of course, to their financial advisor. Sometimes we can do this, as you said, Michael, in a real gentle way. And sometimes we need to be a bit more blunt and let the client know that what they're considering could really do financial harm to them and that the person they're working with does not have their best interest in mind.
So that leads us into then this idea of mistakes. So when it comes to this idea of detecting vulnerabilities, cognitive decline, and putting it together to make sure you protect your loved ones and your family, what's one mistake you see people making when it comes to this idea of protecting people from fraud?
Okay, first of all, I think it is a procrastination when it comes to estate planning. Putting in place a deliberate and well thought out will, a power of attorney, a trusted contact form, medical directives, and potentially trusts, maybe special needs trust for people in the family that would have special needs. So by procrastinating and not having a well thought out plan, what can happen is then someone goes into a cognitive decline, and it can often be too late to put the papers in place. So the idea is, while people are of good judgment and of sound mind, that's the time to sit back and be thoughtful. First of all, there's a real peace of mind in doing it, and it helps everyone concerned, not only the client, but the family members. And it gives people a chance to communicate as a family. We encourage that, to talk through these things. It will keep things much more smooth when someone does begin to have issues that elder folks have. And in addition, those that will be asked to step up and handle various areas of finances for family members, they'll be ready, and they'll understand what their responsibilities and duties are.
So that makes logical sense, and a lot of times the feelings and emotions and dynamics surrounding things make doing the logical thing tough, Paul. So what our listeners like is, what's one action everyone, no matter what dynamic they're in, should take right now to make progress here? Can you just name one? What's one action to get started on this?
One action would be for family members to communicate. I encourage families, as a couple is putting together an estate plan, involve the kids, communicate, let them know what you're putting in place, and be as open as you're comfortable with, and also to share the documents. Once these documents are complete, a copy should be left with your financial advisor. They can help review them when needed. And also, it's good to have these documents shared with family members, especially those that would be executors or trustees, so that they're well aware of what their responsibilities are. And if something should happen to a client, that these forms are in the hands of the people that can take steps that would help the client and to be in their best interest.
So I love this, Paul. To combat vulnerability, it's about communication, information sharing. So
Yes.
Share information with trusted people as soon as you're comfortable doing so, because that's the biggest, shining the light on things is the biggest way to combat fraud and vulnerability. So thank you so much, Paul. We really appreciate it. Any last words for our audience before we close?
My last words of advice on this topic would be, don't be shy about speaking with, let's say, your parents as they're aging. If you see something, let them know, talk with them, try to get them to engage, because sometimes when people are beginning to struggle from a cognitive standpoint, they isolate, they go into a certain area of denial. But if we can talk with our folks or our grandparents, and they know that we're coming from an area where we simply want to help them, we can perhaps get a dialogue going that would help them to do some of the things they need to do that would protect them from potential fraud or abuse.
Well, Paul, it's such an important topic. We're so grateful for all that you do for your clients and for sharing your wisdom with our audience. And I just want our audience to know that's everything we have for you today. This has been Money on Your Mind. A big thanks to financial planner Paul Jordan for joining me, and we'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss it, and we'd appreciate it if you left us a rating too. I'm Michael Liersch from Edelman Financial Engines. Talk to you next time.